Welcome back to History by Lynny. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at some of the fashion around Europe during the 15th century. We'll be covering the kirtle, the Burgundian gown, as well as the Giornea and Gamurra from Italy. Many of these styles during this period were seen through all classes, from peasants to nobility. The main differences were the fabrics and embellishments used. The craftsmanship was also far superior in the clothing of the wealthy compared to the lower classes. Basic undergarments were worn with a different style of dresses and clothing, such as the chemise, which was made of linen and would extend below the knee and had sleeves past the elbow. When looking at images from the Middle Ages, you'll most commonly see this type of dress on women. The kirtle. The kirtle was a dress style that was seen in Western Europe from the early 1300s into the middle of the 16th century, with its popularity peaking during the 15th century. It was the first garment that was made to fit the body versus being draped and requiring the use of belts or folds to fit closer to the body, although the earlier styles were more loose-fitting with no need for lacing. The 15th century version of the kirtle was a long dress with a fitted bodice, narrow sleeves, and somewhat of a voluminous skirt. This type of dress was worn by all classes of women, from peasants to nobles, but the difference, of course, when it came to the different classes, was the quality of the fabric, although often made of wool or linen. Other details, such as the length of the sleeves and the length of the skirt, were also different. The wealthy women would have longer trains, as they could afford more fabric, and they didn't have to worry about their clothing getting in the way of any work needed to be done. Typically seen in solid colors, women would often layer their kirtles with a long sleeve kirtle underneath a kirtle with elbow-length sleeves in order to show the different color of the one worn underneath. Linen kirtles were also used as the undergown depending on the season. The gown had lacing or buttons at the front as well as at the end of the sleeves, and in some images we also see the kirtle with lacing at the sides, however it was not as common. After the 1450s, we see the kirtle made with shoulder-length sleeves so that women could pin on the sleeves, making them interchangeable. This is where we begin to see sleeves in different patterns, and decorative pins and ribbons would be used as an added accessory. For the working class woman, this allowed them to have short sleeves that wouldn't get in the way and made it easier to roll up the sleeves of the chemise to get it out of the way as well. However, this was done strictly at home or in a private space, as they would not go out in public wearing short sleeves. In the later years, the kirtle was used as an undergarment for the upper class, while the lower classes continued to wear them as both an under and outer garment. In Northern Europe, during the mid-15th century, the Burgundian gown was the popular dress of choice amongst women. With Duke Philip the Good in power, the Duchy of Burgundy became very influential in Northern Europe, leading the way in fashion with their wealth and their love for extravagant things coming into play. As he was known as the man who wore all black, his court was regarded as one of the most lavish and splendid by his contemporaries. Burgundian luxury goods became sought after across Europe, and the Duke was reported to have spent 2% of Burgundy's income on Italian silks and cloths of gold, often from Florence. The Burgundian gown, which evolved from the loose-fitting houppelande, was an A-line shaped gown with fitted sleeves and a deep V neckline at both the front and the back. The cuffs of the sleeves were made of fur or velvet, typically a different fabric than the dress, as was the neckline. The gowns were cinched together at the waist using a girdle, which is a belt. In the earlier years, the belts were very wide to help give that fitted waist look, but as the years went on, the dresses were made with the bodices more fitted along the torso, so there was no need for the wider belt, which led to the use of thinner belts that were often worn loose. In paintings of women wearing a Burgundian gown, we can see the undergown as well. Underneath the Burgundian gown, they would have worn a chemise and a kirtle. Thanks to the deep V of the neckline, we see a piece of fabric across their chest, and we also get glimpses of the underskirt in many of the images, both often shown in a different color than the gown. Another feature seen on the Burgundian gown are the incredibly long trains. The length of the trains were regulated, as were many things during this time. The queen could have the longest train, reaching lengths of about 16 feet. Blood princesses and duchesses could have their trains up to 11 feet, and a countess up to 7 feet. All other women were required to have their trains shorter. In Italy, the dress of choice was the Gamurra. Much like the kirtle, it was a pretty basic and practical dress, but the material it was made out of would vary upon the status of the woman. For example, women could have gamurras for the home, which were fairly simple even for a wealthy woman, and a more decorative one for special occasions. The gamurra, worn over a camicia, or chemise, was lined and consisted of a fitted bodice that laced at the front and a full skirt. The waist of the skirt would hit just slightly above the natural waistline. The dress would be made in a variety of fabrics like wool, brocade, silk, linen, and in a variety of colors and patterns as well, although they're often seen in solid colors for the working and lower class, while the upper class used more elaborate details and designs. The style of the sleeve would also vary from a basic style to a more elaborate design with embroidery and adorned with gems, pearls, and even gold. From the different paintings, you can see that women enjoyed using various sleeve designs to make their own fashion statements. In Florence during the mid-15th century, we start to see the gamurra paired with an overgown. This overgown is known as a giornea. We see this combination worn by women in countless portraits and frescoes, and it wasn't just for women, however. The giornea was very popular amongst men as well. For women, the giornea was a floor-length overgown, sleeveless and open at the sides and the front, allowing the gamurra to show through. They were often made of lightweight fabrics with a removable fur lining, allowing them to be used throughout all the seasons. The women would belt their giornea several different ways: completely belted, belted only in the front, giving a cape-like illusion, and not belted at all. For men, the giornea was also a very popular look worn by servants and peasants to even the most elite. We also see them worn by young and old, and even worn over armor. The young men preferred shorter lengths when it came to their giornea, while the older, more conservative man wore theirs a little bit longer, covering more of the leg. Originally, the giornea was just a rectangular piece of fabric with an opening for the head, and then we see it evolved with pleating and decorative folds, embroidered details, as well as decorative and fur trims. The fabrics would be the typical wool or silk, and sometimes they would be lined with a different color underneath. There were different ways to create the pleating on the giornea. It could have been made with the pleated folds, which in this case would take more time and work from a skilled tailor, or belting could be used to create a ruching and pleated effect. In this fresco from 1469 by Francesco del Cosa, we see two young men wearing their pleated giorneas two different ways. One completely belted, while the other wears his belted only at the front, leaving the back panel free. This is an extant giornea from 1481 that was found on the remains of 33-year-old Italian nobleman Diego Cavaniglia. If you're interested in watching a quick video on Diego, I'll link it below in the description. By the end of the 15th century, the giornea begins to lose popularity, and by the early 16th century completely goes out of style as codpieces become the trend. Which one of these is your favorite? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, please be sure to give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more medieval and Renaissance history. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.